Welcome back everyone to the afternoon program of the session. The next panel, titled Building Cohesion in a Multi-Ethnic Environment, will be moderated by my esteemed colleague and fellow research associate, Mr. Leonard Lim from IPS. Mr. Leonard, the floor is yours.
Thanks, Shamil. I think I have probably the toughest job today because all of you are probably full after lunch, tired after listening to some engaging insights in the morning. So I thought I would just set the context again with some short remarks of what we are speaking about today. Over the weekend, many of you might have watched the World Cup final, Football World Cup final. If you didn't, France won, and they won with a very multicultural team. One of the most multicultural teams in the competition. 17 or 16 of the 23 players actually could trace their roots outside of France and could have played for another country. Yet, back home in France itself, the country is mired in long-standing debates over issues of race, identity, immigration, integration, very difficult social issues. So as French of all stripes and all backgrounds took to the streets of Paris and other cities to celebrate the World Cup win, various commentators have expressed hopes that this World Cup win will be a springboard for a new beginning for France. One of the key players in the French team, he was asked about the multicultural aspects of their team, and he had this to say. His name is Antoine Griezmann, the white guy. Even though he's white, he's also a half German and half Portuguese, okay? So Antoine Griezmann says, "That's the France we love, different origins, but we are all united. In our team, there are many players who come from different horizons, but with the same state of mind. As soon as you wear the jersey, we play together." I also speak from personal experience in how playing sports can unite a very diverse group of individuals. So I would never be able to make it to the World Cup. Probably Singapore won't also in our lifetimes. But I was fortunate that in my school days, I was part of a team that was very, very diverse. We had, this is a black and white picture. It shows my age. We had people we had Chinese, we had Malays, we had Indians, we had a Eurasian captain as well. This was my sports team in junior college. So we forged very close friendships through training and eating together and playing together and laughing together. Our common goal was to beat everyone else. Like that French team, we just wanted to beat everyone else and win the championship. So that united us. We had a very strong sense of unity because of that. So this unity has continued long after our school days. I've gone for Malay weddings. Some of them got married. I've gone for Hari Raya open house. I've even gone to a Hindu funeral because one of them unfortunately died. Okay, but just like this black and white photo, I think the world has changed from the time when I was a student. I think Dr. Hon Chiew Weng alluded to this earlier in his session. Now we are seeing increasing religiosity, decreased social mixing, segregationist or exclusivist practices like Dr. Hon Chiew Weng said earlier on the rise. And this has an impact on our social cohesion if it's allowed to take root. So what might Singapore look like, for example, if we do not eat at the same table as those who do not have the same dietary restrictions or requirements as us, for instance? This panel, coming up soon, will discuss these pertinent and very important issues. We'll talk about what sort of policies we can have that will enlarge our shared spaces as Singaporeans. What are the shared experiences or reference points we can turn to that can bring us together to rise above our differences? I'll now just introduce our three speakers. Each of them have played instrumental roles in furthering the cause of interracial harmony and interfaith understanding in their respective organizations. Our first speaker, Dr. Hon Chiew Weng, he retired from heading Hwa Chong Institution last year. He spent 35 years there, first as a physics teacher, rising up to head the science department, and finally to principal. He joined Chinese High in 1982, 3 years after he became a SAP school. Our second speaker, Dr. Sharifah Mariam Aljunied. She's a lead facilitator at OnePeople.sg, as well as a chartered psychologist. She has facilitated numerous experiential conversations on issues of race and ethnicity organized by OPSG over the years. Her great-great-grandfather Arab philanthropist Syed Omar Ali Aljunied built Singapore's first mosque, Masjid Omar, Kampong Melaka. This is somewhere near the Sharia family courts, if you're familiar with it, Havelock area. He also donated the land on which St. Andrew's Cathedral stands to the Anglican community. Our final speaker, Mohamed Irshad Abbas, is the founder and president of Roses of Peace, a youth-driven, ground-up, non-profit organization that seeks to strengthen religious harmony here. He set it up when he was an SMU student in 2012. Since then, it has reached out to over 40,000 people and engaged over 2,000 youths. They hold interfaith conferences, youth forums, and the aim is to unite people from different backgrounds and build social cohesion in Singapore. Without further ado, it gives me great pleasure to welcome our first speaker, Dr. Hon. Dr. Hon, please.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. I think thanks for having me today. I think IPS must be thinking, after retirement, I'm very free, nothing to do. So keep me occupied. But actually not true. So retirement has been very interesting. When I received this invitation, the first thing that came to my mind is I should ask the current principal of Hwa Chong to come and talk to you. But on second thought, I thought, hey, this might be too sensitive issue, right? So he may not be comfortable talking to you in a public setting like this. So I accepted the invitation because I can say whatever I want, and after that I can just run away, nobody can catch me. All right. Let me give you a little bit of background before we have this discussion later on. Chinese High School will be celebrating 100th anniversary next year. So we are 99 years old this year. Right? When it was first started, I think the mission of the school was very simple. It was supposed to provide education to immigrants from China. A very simple mission, just to provide education for immigrants' children. So the school was doing well for some time, but when it came to about 1960s to 70s especially, it went downhill. Reason was very simple. At that time, many parents choose to send their kids to English schools, knowing very well that if they send their kids to Chinese school, eventually they may have difficulty finding jobs. So it was really difficult to recruit students in the 70s. Many Chinese schools had to close down. So I think our government saw that, and the then PM decided that we should have a special scheme to turn Chinese school into bilingual school, and that was the beginning of SAP scheme. So Chinese High was one of the schools, one of the 9 schools selected to be a SAP school. So at the time, we worked very hard, and if you have read the history of the school, you find that both teachers and students worked very, very hard during the period because they have to switch from Chinese curriculum to English curriculum. Today, Hwa Chong is quite different. Our mission is to nurture leaders in 3 areas, research, industry, and government, and we make it a point to remind our students the reason why we nurture them is because we want them to serve the nation. And we kept our culture and the values, right? So now the school is a bilingual, bicultural school, and there are 2 core values that we have been holding on right from day one, are these 2 core values, 自强不息 and 饮水思源. 自强不息 essentially means never say die, okay? So it's about self-renewal, constant self-renewal. It comes with innovation, it comes with resilience. 饮水思源 simply means we remember our benefactor. So we always remind our kids to give back to society, give back to the nation when they are successful. So these are the 2 core values, and it's precisely these are the core values that our leaders saw in our school, that we want to keep these schools as SAP school. Now these are some of our students. They are familiar faces, all right? So we have Wicket, Hong Tak, Chiew Weng, all these are students in the 80s, right? In the 1980s. First few years, first 10 years of SAP scheme. In fact, Wicket and Chiew Weng were my students. I taught them physics, right? So today you find that they are able to work with people from all walks of life, right? There's no difficulty at all, though they were from SAP school. So SAP school at that time was really very Chinese, right? So in fact, 99% of the time they spoke Chinese, right? But today it's a bit different. If you look at SAP schools in Hwa Chong for the last 10 years, there are lots of activities that involve people from different community. Right? Our students celebrate Labour Day with our own estate staff, right? And they have joint research projects. This is a joint research project with students from different schools. We give talks to our students. Actually conduct workshops for students from different schools, and our students even go to mosque to observe breakfast, right? So these are some of the activities, and as compared to 30 years ago, I think students in Hwa Chong now are very much exposed to different culture. We believe in these 5 minds for the future, right? One of the minds is respectful mind. In fact, we make it a point to tell our students that we should welcome differences between human individuals, try to understand other communities and seek to work effectively with them. Because we know very well that in time to come, when they were to leave schools and work in the community, they have no choice but to work with people from all walks of life. They have to work with people from all different cultures, right, including people from other countries. So respectful mind is something that they must acquire. How do we do that? Activities, there are all kinds of activities. Within Singapore, we invite a lot of people come to schools. In fact, every month we have some form of activities where we can work with students from different schools. We open up our sabbaticals program, for example. Every 10 weeks, we have 1 week put aside for sabbaticals, and that sabbatical week we open to students from our cluster schools. So students from those schools can come and learn together with our students. And we go out for let's say, OBS together with students from other schools, and we go for community service with students from IT, for example, right? And there are groups of students who go to Patapis Children's Home and work with them on things like tuition, mathematics tuitions, and so on. So these are some of the activities that we have. And on their own, students also work on very interesting community projects. These particular projects called Project Integrates, they actually help migrant workers, right, to integrate them into our society, right, by having activities like library visits, concert, and fundraising. And some of the students in this photograph you can see, these are MRT stations worker, okay? You know, Tankaki station is just next to our school, so we appreciate the fact that all these migrant workers come to Singapore and really construct a MRT station for us. So our students make it a point to invite them for dinner and interact with them so that we show our appreciation. By having that kind of interaction, I think they learn to respect different culture, at the same time learn to interact with them, right? Of course, the last 3 years I've been actively involved in Purple Parade, right? So our kids have been actively working with people with special needs. Besides working with people within Singapore, I think we invite a lot of people from other parts of the world to come in to work with us. At the same time, we send our students all over the world to interact with people from a totally different culture, right? Over here, I have some examples of people going over to US, China, UK, Australia, and we bring in people who are who are talented in science to attend our Nobel Forum. So all these are platforms that we create for our students to interact with people from different cultural background. And a few years ago, we felt that it's time for us to really ask ourselves, how is our cultural intelligence? How is our students' cultural intelligence, having gone through Hwa Chong for 4 years or 6 years? Right? So we adopted David Livermore's CQ model. Right? This model has 4 dimensions: motivation, knowledge, strategy, and behavior. It was a longitudinal study. All right? So let me share with you some of the results. We took a pre-test when the students were in Sec 2, after they have come in for about a year. So we give them a pre-test, and 2 years later, when they reached Sec 4, we gave them a post-test. You can see the difference, right? So all the 4 domains of this CQ test have gone up significantly. What does they mean by 69, 74, and so on? Let me share with you the world norm. So they mean by the time our students come to Sec 4, they have gone through quite a number of activities, quite a number of programs that require them to work with people from different cultural background. This is the results. Compared to the world norm, we are significantly higher than the world norm. The world norm data come from people who are adults, okay? And ours is only Sec 4. Sec 4, it means 16 years old. Right? We compare our 16 years old students with adults in different parts of the world, and we found that our students' CQ, especially for knowledge, is very much higher than the world norm. 74 compared to 54. Right? And strategy-wise, strategy means when they plan carefully, whether a student plan carefully before they interact with people from different cultural background. So again, 74 versus 67, significantly higher statistically. Right? And for the action, whether our kids know how to change their verbal or non-verbal behavior when they interact with people from different culture, again, we are significantly higher than the world norm. So we felt comfortable that our students, having gone through all these programs in our school, they are actually quite comfortable, and they really respect people from different background, different cultural backgrounds, and they are all ready to collaborate with people from any country, any racial or religious group. This is something that we are quite comfortable with. So I must thank IPS for giving me this opportunity to share with you that Hwa Chong today, compared to 30 years ago, we are quite different. From a Chinese school catered to Chinese immigrants' education, today we are a bilingual, bicultural school with a very global perspective. So for those of you who have been reading about Hwa Chong, you still remember Chinese High as a community school. I think it's about time that you change your mindset. We are quite different today, okay? So having given you this background, I'm ready to interact with you later on at the forum. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Hon. And thank you, IPS, for giving me the opportunity, and OnePeople.sg. They are, in fact, one of our strongest supporters of Rose of Peace. Full of hands, because I know we are after lunchtime and everyone's feeling sleepy. You can just see by the slouching faces. How many of you guys have heard of Rose of Peace? Not from the booklet, even before that. Rose of Peace essentially is a ground-up initiative. We started this back in 2012, myself being involved in it from the onset. I think you can read more about how the initial formation of Rose of Peace is online, but I think for the purpose of this discussion, I'll focus on some of the highlights that I think we can draw conclusion from based on our journey. So I'll just focus on those. So we like to say, spreading peace, love, and harmony in Singapore, one rose at a time, because that's what we do. We started off with our signature initiative by giving out roses. But before that, let me just focus on the values that drive us at Rose of Peace. Essentially, we are driven by peace, love, and harmony. I think as nice sounding as it is, I think it's important that to build a peaceful community, we have to exemplify it through our actions. And for that, we promote through the giving out of roses. We attach a greeting card. I think I brought a sample greeting card. You can have a look. With attached greeting cards saying of peace from all the different religious leaders. So I think it's important because end of the day, when you take out the labels of whoever said whatever quote, whichever religious leaders, for instance, Jesus Christ, Gautama Buddha, Prophet Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, and even from the Bhagavad Gita, the message is the same. It's one that is of peace and harmony and love and kindness and compassion. So that's something that we want to bring across through our initiative. And love, to appreciate and respect all faith communities through understanding our differences, because end of the day, we can't be the same. We have to recognize the fact that all of us are distinct, and we have to cherish our differences and work across religious divides, because we need to live harmoniously. That's the third value that we espouse. It's strengthening the social fabric of a society by recognizing and leveraging on similarities. So we try to do this by different activities, by enlarging the common spaces, which I'll share later on. And how we started Roses of Peace is really, you'll be surprised. It started off in 2012, when in the aftermath of Charlie Hebdo. How many of you guys know Charlie Hebdo, the caricature against Prophet Muhammad? I'm trying to, raise participation level because everyone's feeling a bit dull. So in the aftermath, what happened was I was an SMU student, 2012, and I was approached by a senior of mine who wanted to do a protest at the campus because she was very angry with what was going on in the Western media, especially with the vilification of Muslims and sort of, the global uproar to the innocence of the Muslim video that was released on YouTube in America, as well as the aftermath after the video when we had the caricature against Prophet Muhammad that was published by Charlie Hebdo in France. So in that incident, she wanted to protest, and I was taken aback because I was, leading one of the societies in SMU, and people were asking me to endorse the protests. And how can you do that in Singapore? What is, you're going to get into trouble, right? Because I just started a society. I was at that time heading the Political Association and the Muslim Society because two very volatile, organization. So which means that I wanted to get a sense of how these students were reacting. And a lot of them, they were pent up, they were very angst about how things were taking shape in the world. And they wanted to show the displeasure. And I said, why don't you gather friends who are keen and how they are interested about, to do something about this. So why don't you take a step back? Because she wanted to protest because to show that Islam is a peaceful religion, but we can do through other means, right? So that's how the whole concept and the idea of roses came up. We thought, how about we give out roses with attached greeting card with saying of peace? And that is to exemplify the spirit and the essence of the message that Prophet Muhammad came with. And then we realized that we live in a multi-religious, multicultural society. We don't want to be seen as proselytizing, or we're not promoting one religion or another. And this is something uniquely Singapore that we have to guard. How do we show that? By including quotes of all the different faith luminaries, Jesus Christ, Gautama Buddha from the Sikh tradition, Guru Nanak, from Bhagavad Gita and Confucius, and all the faith religious leaders. So when we did that, what happened was, naturally we pulled together youth from all walks of life, regardless of race or religion. We started off focusing on religion, but we realized that we can't proceed as it is because race is also intricately linked to religion. And that's why we formed the strong partnership with OPSG, and they've been supporting us, for some time. So this is how we started. We see this nice photo here. I think, is Dr. Jen still around? So he's the one at the tip of the heart. We give out roses. Literally, we give out roses, as I shared with you. But it doesn't just include just giving out roses. We train the volunteers because these volunteers are from all walks of life. When we started out 2012, we gave out 3,000 roses. We had about 100 volunteers. But over the years, most recently we have grown. And most recent last year, we gave out 10,000 roses across Singapore. In an annual event, in a one day, simultaneously we give out in 20 locations. We have about 300 volunteers that we mobilize. And happy to say that over the years, we didn't expect to grow. It was a natural progression. Like I say, it's a ground-up initiative. We weren't even planning to register our organization. We initiated in 2012. We weren't even registered until last year. And why we had to register? Because we had our patron who came on board, Madam Halima Yaakob. So, and that was just before she took office. So my friend was saying, Irshad, you better register yourself. I said, why? You can't have a patron for a ground-up initiative. You're not registered. So it was really a reactionary move, how we have grown and how we have progressed over the years. And we have also seen a natural inclination by our youth to come forward because it's a ground-up initiative. And they feel that we are non-partisan, we are not fronting any agenda. They know who we are, they know us, and they can relate naturally to us. So what we do before we give out the rose, we train them because it's not just important to just give out the rose, but they have to be trained on mindful communication, on cross-cultural communication, on why they do this. And we basically want to bring together youth from different religious background and racial background and social classes. And like Dr. Hun was saying, from SAP schools as well as madrasas, from all walks of life, bring together, give them the platform to discuss issues as well as to make friendship. And thankfully, I'm happy to say that since 2012, many of these youth have kept coming back to us. So we have engaged about 2,000 volunteers over the years, and they have formed strong bonds and friendship. And it doesn't just stop there, just training them, but packing of the roses is very important because these roses have to be packed. And we inbuilt team building activities, through our activities whereby they come together and And regardless of the race or religion and differences, they have to pack 3,000 roses or 10,000 roses last year in about 1 day. And that's not an easy feat. Glad that we managed to pull it off. But this is something that, it's very enlightening, it's very heartwarming to see hundreds of volunteers, Muslims, Christians, Buddhists, Hindus, Sikh, from all other religion under one roof, motivating each other as they pack thousands of roses. And at the end of the day, they have a really good time, fun time, they take selfies, they post online. So why I'm sharing with you all these things, this is essentially what Ground Up Initiative is. It's very natural, it's very progressive. They call in their friends, they call in their families, they call in their relatives even, their uncles and aunties and grandparents. So they come together to volunteer and to lend their time for a common cause. And we don't just stop there. After they give out the roses, they have an appreciation dinner. Because youth, especially today, when you talk about religious and racial harmony, it's always the same faces that you see over and over again in events and forums and dialogues. So because what we want to do is attract new people. So when we appreciate their efforts, we are having appreciation dinner after they've given out, it really brings together more people, and they bring in their friends the following subsequent years. And that's what we have been able to do. And what's really started off as just an annual event, what happened was there was a lot of demand for it. We have people from various organizations, various institutions, and asking us, can you do Rose of Peace in our community, etc. So what we essentially do is to build safe spaces, and safe spaces include like I said, the packing, the bonding, the training, etc. But also we have youth forums. Because what we realize is the initial stage when we give out the rose is an awareness stage. After awareness, what we have to do is to build the understanding between the people, between different religion and races. And for that, we need to create safe spaces. So we have youth forums where we invite community leaders such as ministers and members of parliament. Because when the youth have that impression and they realize that their voice is being heard by the policymakers, they feel empowered. That's what we realize. So when we do that, we draw more people from all walks of life. People who are skeptical. So we always tend to attract the skeptics because they feel that their voice is always not heard, and it's always like the majority, whatever is being pushed up by the government, etc., is always the agenda of the day. But when we give them this platform to discuss these issues and ask hard questions, and typically the media is not invited. Well, they can cover the event after or before, but during the dialogue itself, they can ask anything to the ministers or the members of parliament. So that really empowers them to step forward, to ask difficult questions, and to understand some of the nuances of why certain policies are the way it is. And interfaith conferences. So our approach to interfaith is very different from many other organizations out there. What we do is we don't just talk about the tenets or the pillars of the religion, because that's already done and dusted. A lot of us can go online, Wikipedia, whatever, we can find about a particular religion. But how many of us are actually inspired by the stories of the people of faith who do social good? So we invite the speakers, specially curated, like for instance, I think Dr. Mariam is on the panel here on this photo. So this Faith in Action conference was there, and prior to that, Ambassador Zainal was one of our speakers as well. So what we do is we invite individuals who are driven by faith. So as you see from the panel, this quick Chiew Weng, she's a Presbyterian, she's a Christian. Dr. Sharifah Mariam Aljunied, she's a Muslim, Arab. And Venerable Chuan Guan, he's a Buddhist priest. So what we do is we get people who are really doing good in the community, but are they driven by, and how are they driven by faith, and how their religion shapes, and what values that shapes them to do whatever that they're doing. So when we approach it from that perspective, what happens is the youth, they can relate. They can relate to stories, they can relate to practical implementable steps, and be inspired to do more of the initiatives and take the next step of understanding to appreciation. And when I say awareness, understanding, appreciation is when they become a volunteer, when they appreciate the nuances, when they appreciate how we function and how we reach out and taking action, they become a volunteer with us. And as volunteers, before that, we also have this recent, earlier this year in February, we had this symposium, Faith in Leadership, where we don't just tap on, the members of the parliament or ministers and local civil society leaders. We also brought in speakers from overseas. Krish Revel from Faith in Leadership in UK, one of the most, leading interfaith organization in the world. And then Tion from America, youth leadership. So we don't approach interfaith just interfaith, but also with youth leadership. I think that's very important. And so Connect Us program, as I was sharing with you, is, so we try to move to the heartlands. It's not just important, we do an annual event, but we go to the heartlands. So Connect Us, this was at Nisun GRC. So we did a GRC level event, where we also launched the Rose of Peace Advocates Network. So basically our volunteers are part of this Advocates Network. And this is the GR, so we reach out to the heartlands, we also reach out to schools, so this was at ITE College West, actually done yesterday, and we work with polytechnics, universities, so we want to bring Rose of Peace closer to home, wherever they are, to the heartlands, the schools, and also with organizations. This was the Singapore Kindness Movement for their Kindness Day. And we want to work with various stakeholders in all parts of society because we want to bring that message of peace directly to them, not expecting them to show up for forums and this and that, because typically people don't. And so we try to raise awareness in this regard. So this is something that we are really proud of. So last year, taking advice from our patron, she said that, Irshad, you are good at, Rose of Peace is very good at building rapport with the youth and attracting them and involving them in building peace in Singapore. Why don't you do something of sorts like an interfaith ambassador or peace ambassador program? So we took that initiative, the idea, so we launched something called the Rose of Peace Ambassador Program. This is a signature initiative that we launched earlier this year. Out of 90 applicants, we interviewed and we selected 30 applicants and appointed them for a 1-year period. And this appointment ceremony, what happened was they're going to focus on not just building religious harmony in Singapore, but also cross-cultural communication. They were trained on online digital media engagement. They were trained on some of the security issues that involve in faith-race relations in Singapore. So we had experts from all fields coming down to train the participants for the first 6 months. And next 6 months, they're supposed to do a mini project. So what we do is, as I was sharing with you, awareness, understanding, whereby awareness is to the public. And through understanding, we have, through the safe spaces that we create, we have the participants who are joining us, who then become the advocates or volunteers, so to speak. And when they appreciate what we're doing, why we're doing this, and when they come to the ambassador program, they become multipliers. That's the hope that, we have structured the whole thing. And one of the key things that one of the highlights that we did as part of the ambassador program, one of the ambassadors said, you know what, Irshad, we have the, Good Friday is coming, and prior to Good Friday, they have the Lent period, 40 days. And many of the ambassadors didn't even know what a Lent period was. Many of the Singaporeans also didn't know what Lent. So all of us know about the public holidays, like we discussed, but do we know the nuances behind some of the traditional practices? Like, for instance, the Muslims, they have the Isra and Miraj, where Prophet, ascended up to the heavens. For the Hindus and the Sikhs, they have other festivals, etc. So the idea was to reach out to them and to explain that. And we do that through, it is one of the initiatives where we wrote a letter of peace to all the churches in Singapore. And we're invited by the Methodist Church and all the non-denominational, denominational churches, etc., to reach out to them. Digital engagement, quickly, is because these are youth. You can't engage them the same way and the traditional way that we have always engaged them and built peace in Singapore. You have to engage them through stories. You have to engage them through online interactions, etc. So we have this program called, we have this online initiative, Humans are Rose of Peace, where we capture the lives of our ambassadors, as well as participants and volunteers and advocates, and people who receive the rose, where they share their stories and inspire other people. So we try to capture that. And ROP Faith Lift, this is our online initiative as well, where we, basically focus on a particular occasion, say Palm Sunday or Lent period, or we have even, Isra Miraj, Vaisakhi for the Sikh, where we sort of educate people on what these, special occasions mean, etc. So this is done online, on Facebook, on YouTube, through our WhatsApp channels, etc. And recently, we launched something called the Petal Peace Ambassador, a brand ambassador. So we realized that, my parting words is, Petals is a branding ambassador for Rose of Peace, and why we launched it is a fictional character, basically, but it encompasses the characteristic of today's millennials. And just like, and today's millennials, and just like any other youth, Petals is one that cares for the community and is now an interfaith advocate. Why we launched this online initiative of Petals is to create an intimate experience on social media, especially for youth, through storytelling. And these are powerful tools to engage the audience, but with Petals, it is exactly what we aim to do, to show that every youth is capable of being an interfaith leader, change maker in their own right, and it starts from them. So this is Petals, and you can follow us on Instagram, Rose of Peace, and our website, roseofpeace.com, and Facebook. And just want to part with our message from a patron, where she said, organizations such as Rose of Peace play an important role as bridges between our communities. This role is even more crucial now as the world is experiencing increasing uncertainty and threat to social cohesion. And ground-up initiatives like Rose of Peace tend to be more agile, nimble, and able to quickly rally support, as well as respond to new trends or issues. By working together, we're able to enlarge our common spaces, connect with others. So with that, thank you for the opportunity, and look forward to the question and answer later. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. Hello. Thank you so much to the organizers for inviting me to share some thoughts and views, but I think this very important conversation topic. Just to let you know, I'm not going to be using slides. You see, before I became a psychologist, in my previous life, I was a teacher. So teachers like to tell stories, hard habit to break, yeah? So I'll share with you a bit of stories that I draw from my current experiences, as well as my own personal experiences and personal stories that are very dear to me. So as I think Leonard has actually shared, I'm here sharing with you in my capacity as a facilitator for OPSG, OnePeople.sg, experiential conversations. How many of you have actually participated in an experiential conversation? Okay. How many of you know what experiential conversations are? Or have heard about it? Okay. 2 hands. All right, great. So basically, just to give a brief overview so that you understand where the stories come from. Yeah. Couple of years back, OPSG started this initiative, and the goal is very much similar to, I think, some of the key messages that the 2 previous speakers, and I'm sure the speakers this morning as well, have actually articulated, which is the need to create safe spaces for people in Singapore from various backgrounds, young and old, to have conversations about sensitive topics that for the longest time perhaps we have pushed under the carpet or skirt around it. But there's a growing awareness that there is a need to talk about this, but in a way that makes people feel safe, that is not end up being hijacked, that people go away. Of course, we are realistic. One conversation doesn't change you overnight, but at least you leave that conversation perhaps having an opportunity to have insight about other people's opinions, about other people's views, which are different from yours. And we know that because social circles, if we leave it to nature, may not necessarily be mixed. And we know that sometimes there are people who, not through any fault of theirs, have quite a limited social circle. So they may not be able to necessarily encounter experiences whereby other people have a different view from them. So the experiential conversations was designed as such. It's small, about 10 to 20 people. So I started as a participant. So you can imagine some come because they are curious. I did. But after experiencing it, I see the potential value that I get from it, and I can see how, as myself, as my background as a psychologist and an educator, I can perhaps add value to it. Hence, like many others, I also became a facilitator. And so the topic of conversations in experiential conversations is typically open-ended. There are some guiding questions. And it's created to steer conversations and ideas about ethnicity, race, religion. Yeah? And I'm not the only facilitator, but we've had many, many groups. We've had young, old, a group of just professionals, medical experts. Some volunteered to come. Some were volunteered by their bosses to come because some of these groups were actually corporate initiated. But without exception, in every conversation that we've had, the issue or the word racial tolerance will emerge, will emanate. Right? And I want to spend this just 15 minutes that I have to speak a little bit about that. And what I've learned from the conversations that we've had so far is this word tolerance is a very powerful word. Powerful because it evokes so much emotions in people. Right? You have some people that says, tolerance? Oh yeah, we've have it, pat down. Oh, we are beyond tolerance in Singapore. And I'm not caricaturing. This is people who are genuinely believing in that. And not many people realize that. Yeah? They really believe that in Singapore, we have completely gone beyond tolerance and what we have is harmony. At the same time, there are people who say, no, what we have is fake harmony. It's fake tolerance. You scratch a bit and the blood leaks out. Right? And then there are people who have different take in terms of what tolerance means to them. But regardless of all the strong perceptions and emotions, one thing is consistent. Everybody agrees that tolerance is not enough. Everybody, regardless of their personal views about where we are in terms of tolerance, our own tolerance quotient, everybody agrees that for us to be the image of what we want to be, we have to go beyond tolerance and go towards harmony. So, what does tolerance mean for me? So this is my personal view, and I really want to spend a lot of time, give more time to our conversations because I really would love to hear your views and your reactions to the same idea. I don't like the word tolerance because to me, tolerance and hate are two sides of the same coin. Why do I say that? Tolerance is an emotion for me predicated by another emotion. What is the emotion that predicates tolerance? I'm better than you. I'm more superior than you. Therefore, even though I know that you are lesser, not so good, I tolerate. Yeah? So that's my view. Okay? And I'm open that that may not be the only view. What is hate? For me, hate, underpinning that hate is again that similar emotion. I am good, you are evil. I am right, you are wrong. And when that sentiment intensifies, hate is the emotion that fuels us to justify why we can treat other people negatively because I'm good, you are evil. Isn't that the narrative that we are all grew up with since we are young? Good triumphs over bad. Yeah? So even our cartoons, isn't it, seems to emphasize that narrative. So for me, I don't just see tolerance as something that we need to go beyond. I think tolerance is something that we need to sidestep, if possible. And really ask ourselves, what is harmony that we are seeking for? And if harmony is that goal that we want, what is the underpinning, what is the predicate emotions that we need to nurture in ourselves in order to fuel that harmony? Why you may ask, why is the emotions behind a particular attitude so important to me? In some ways, it relates to what I feel as what is harmony all about. It is true that knowledge about cultures are important. It is true that understanding, learning about other cultures is important. But throughout the conversations that we've had in the ECs and my own personal experience, what I've come to understand is that harmony has nothing to do about what you know of me. Harmony is how you make me feel. If I'm a minority and you are a majority, harmony is how I feel in your presence. In some circles, I may be a minority, but in some circles, I may be a majority. Right? If I invite some of you, like the photograph shown by Mr. Hon, if I invite some of you to an iftar, you are automatically a minority, and the Muslims are the majority in that context. So it's really about how we make each other feel in spite of the difference that to me is the harmony. It's the basis or the emotion that fuels harmony. So to me, in order to drive towards that harmony, the key effort that I think is needed is really to think about how we can develop empathy, genuine empathy among all of us, and among our children and our children's children. And this is where, again, sometimes I hear so many different views, right? And invariably in our, and this comes up too in the experiential conversation. Because when we talk about differences in culture, there will, more than one time, somebody will suggest, oh, what we need is, the schools to start teaching children about different religions. That should go in the syllabus. We should have, bring back religious education whereby we learn about each other's different religion. And then you see that if there's a teacher in the company, they'll just freak out, right? Because there was a recent survey that asked teachers, what are the topics that you are comfortable to talk about and what are you fearful about? And the two topics that most educators shy away from is actually race and religion, because it is difficult. So I think while we need to create safe platforms where information about differences in religion and race are being talked about and shared, that's important. But I feel that beyond that, we need to think about empathy. And empathy is something that I believe you can start when a child is 3 years old. Right? And I want to share with you, and drawing from my own personal experiences, my own personal stories of what empathy means in the context of religious tolerance or religious harmony. These two stories are dear to me because they are about my family members, but separated by 6 generations. Okay? So the first is, I think you've heard in the introduction, my I got it right, 3 great-grandfather, Syed Umar Aljunied. So he came from Yemen to Palembang and landed in Singapore in 1819. So in 1819, yes, he was a foreign talent, a new citizen, if you like, to Singapore. So and at that time, what happened was he acquired a few lands through auctions, which was happening at that time. And he was a tradesman, but he also donated a lot of his land for public good. Tan Tock Seng Hospital was one of the land that he donated to, as well as the first mosque in Singapore, the oldest mosque in Singapore today, which is the Masjid Umar. Somewhere in 1820, Raffles approached him and said, hey, I need a piece of land for a place of worship of another community. And that's where he gave away the piece of land that is now the St. Andrew's Cathedral, which Raffles later allocated to the Anglican community. And so this story I've heard since young. So when my late father was alive, I'm very close to him. Mr. Zainal knows him very well. And I often asked him, wasn't he frightened? What was his, philosophical, didn't he have philosophical debates within himself about the right and wrong of that, and and all that complexity? And I remember my late father looking at me puzzled. I said, no, Yam, he calls me Yam, no, Yam, Mariam. He said, it's very simple. If God is important to you, God is important to everyone else. And that, to me, in so few words, encapsulate empathy. Does Syed Umar understand the complexity of the Anglican faith? He knew they were of a different faith, but what drove his motive, what sustained his action, was understanding that he believed in God, and God was strongly in his heart. So if prayer was important to him, then prayer is important for everyone. He understood that, he connected that to that emotion. So that's one example. Another more recent example is my daughter, when she was 5 years old. And I deliberately chose a different context because some of you may say, yeah, that was 200 years ago, come on, Come back to the 21st century, Mariam. Okay? So, and this is in my previous home. I used to live in Sims Drive, if you know where that is. So she's an only daughter, and a block away is another neighbor who's also an only daughter at the same age. So they went into the playgroup together. That's how they met, and they clicked, Eileen. And so Eileen's mom and I always see each other. So one day, I was walking home with my daughter, and it used to be that period, the Chinese would actually pray by burning the money, as a form of worship, right? Yeah. So of course, the place was full of smoke and all that. So I was walking home, and then so she asked me, "Why are you doing that?" So I said, "Oh, they are praying." And then she asked me, "What for?" "Oh, I think it's for to pray for their loved ones who have passed away, grandfather." And we walked past, and we saw Eileen's mom doing the same thing, burning the joss stick, deep in prayer and crying. So my daughter looked at me and said, "Mama, Eileen's mother is sad, just as sad as you were when granddad passed away." So, does she need to know the complexity of the Taoist philosophy? No. What she needed to know was that when Eileen's mom was burning the joss stick and crying, that smoke carries her prayer up to where she thinks her father is. And that emotion is exactly the same emotion in me when I'm on my prayer mat praying for the well-being of my late father. So I think that empathy is something that we must recognize, we must identify, and we must nurture. Because I think there's no way of keeping up with how philosophies, ideologies will change. Right? Even if you talk about Islam now, there's so many different, I can't keep up, right? I try to, but I can't, because there's so many different diversities within religion, let alone across religion. But if we hang on to that emotion called empathy, I think at least steadily, I didn't say easily, steadily perhaps, we can go towards this vision, this aspiration that we dream about together, and that's called harmony. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Hon, Dr. Mariam, and Irshad for sharing very personal stories at times that, to me, really showed, I guess, yes, we are all humans, I guess, and there are certain things that unite us. And if we highlight this, or we focus on these things that unite us, that are common among us, that is the key to building, as Dr. Mariam says, empathy, and moving from just mere tolerance to empathy, understanding, and real social cohesion and social harmony. With that, I would like to open the floor to questions. I'll ask that you please identify your name and organization and try to keep your questions short so we can have as many people asking questions as possible. Yes, the lady in white, please.
I am very impressed with the school and with your roses for peace. Those are very good to galvanize the youth and move forward for the next generation. My question is, how do you get budget for your whole bunch of first roses? Some things to give you the money for you to do that and go on. And then for the school, I know the school has their own budget. But given that, I think it needs more money. It's easy to say, but to get it started is difficult.
Do you want to take a few questions, or?
Yeah, are there any more questions? Okay, the guy in blue.
Good afternoon. My name is Wan. I'm from Roses of Peace. I have two questions. One is for Dr. Hon and one is for Dr. Mariam. Dr. Mariam first, how do you inculcate empathy in schools, especially when you mentioned that we are shying away from such topic, races of religion, being discussed in school, and not all teachers are equipped to teach empathy, or they do not even have empathy in the first place, because we are in the midst of graduations, NUS, NTU, and I didn't remember being taught about empathy in our curriculum. So that's first. Second is to Dr. Hun. I may miss this in your presentation, so if I did, I apologize. But how do you internally ensure that within Hwa Chong, for example, SAP school, you do have a good significant intake of people or students from different races or religion, so that it's easier for the teachers to teach empathy internally? in the school without having to engage external party, like for example, maybe collaborate with Roses of Peace. So internally within the school, the student can learn how to interact across races and religion. Thank you.
Okay, I think all of us have a question to answer. So, thanks for the question and thanks for the encouraging words. Roses of Peace, roses is not cheap. It's a lot of money. And last year, 10,000 roses, it doesn't come cheap either. How we raise funds, when we started off, we were a ground-up initiative, so we weren't a registered organization. We didn't have a bank account, neither did we have any other support system. And that was in September when Charlie had to happen. So we decided, let's do Roses of Peace. At that time, it wasn't called Roses of Peace either. We didn't know what we were going to do. So when we figured that we were going to do roses with attached greeting with sayings of peace, we said, let's do it on 10, 11, 12. 10th of November 2012. So that's the first day that we did ROP. And how we raised funds was, incredibly, I don't know, there was a kind soul who came forward to say, he will supply us the roses. So we were happy that happened. But subsequently, we realized that we can't always rely on kind souls. And when reality sinks in, we figured out that, so we tap on Harmony Fund. MCCY has a fund called Harmony Fund, so we tap on that. We also tap on Singapore Kindness Movement. They've got the Singapore Kindness Fund. And so as a grown-up organization, we can't raise funds because we're not a charity. We are not allowed to raise funds, public donations, etc. So we don't do that. Neither do we get sponsorship because typically sponsors want to sponsor, you need to have a registered entity to be able to do that. So as a ground-up initiative back then, we found it really difficult. So however, we partner with different organizations. So we partner with Jamia, we partner with SMU, we partner with different organizations to sort of co-do it. And they don't come with the money, but however, when we tap on the grants, so the grants sort of offsets the costs. When we register ourselves now, now it's easier for us to do a lot more things. And same thing, we tap on the grants. So I think that's something that a lot of youth should capitalize on. There's tons of opportunities and tons of grants available to pursue whatever interest that you have. And when we have Rose of Peace collaborate with OnePeople.sg, they don't give us the money, but they give us the space, to do our activities, etc. So in kind. So we just leverage on existing resources available to maximize their utility and also, do our outreach and have our events, etc.
Okay, I'm luckier. I have no problem with budget. Because whenever I'm short of money, I just ask my old boy to donate. As simple as that. Right? So it's not too difficult for me to do that. So the second question is about how to bring in students from different races to come to Hwa Chong. I think this is difficult because in the first place, it's not easy to get into Hwa Chong. Right? So your PSLE score must be very high before you can get in. And because we're SAP school, I think all students must take Chinese as a first language or second language. So again, not many non-Chinese would like to do that. Right? So we do have about 1% or so, including DPM Dapan's 3 sons, all went through Hwa Chong, taking higher Chinese, and they did very well. Okay. No, it's not impossible, but it's difficult to encourage people to put aside their mother tongue and take Chinese as for first or second language in Hwa Chong. If I had my way, I would prefer to open up the schools a little bit more by taking in students who want to take Chinese as the third language to experience SAP life. Right? So, but of course, if I can't solve problem in one particular way, I prefer to solve problem in another way. Right? If I can't have full-time students in high school to interact with students in Hwa Chong, I open up the campus to students who are from a partner school to come in to interact with our students. And we can also send our students out to interact with people. Right? Why should interaction be taking place in my campus? Right? So there are many other ways to solve the same problem. Right? So that's how we have been doing. If you missed my talk just now, maybe I can give you a remedial lesson later on. Yeah, okay. Yeah. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that nice question about how do we can we put empathy into the syllabus? Yeah. Well, I think empathy is not a head knowledge, right? It's not a knowledge that we can memorize and then regurgitate. Neither is it a skill that if you practice, you learn, you model, you mirror, and you practice, but it doesn't touch your heart, you can be good. No, it doesn't. It actually belongs to a whole realm of competency that involves the attitudes, the worldview, And it's really about emotions. So for emotions, to me, a key question is, can we nurture that emotions? What can we do to nurture the emotions called empathy? And there are certain skills that may facilitate the development of empathy, which we can teach, instruct, or create opportunities for. Okay, so what would that be? One would be for empathy to thrive, you need opportunities to recognize similarity. How you can do that? Similarity, of course, differences. There are many ways. You need not have one particular subject called, let's talk about empathy, and here's your empathy teacher. In any subjects, you can have a recognition that although it's different, what are the similarities? Yeah? And that could be in many ways. The other important thing that, and is in the skill, in the realm of skills and therefore can be taught, is the opportunity to learn how to deal with differences. So for empathy to be nurtured, having an opportunity to recognize that, hey, we are the same despite differences is one important component, but you also need to learn how to deal with differences. And this is a skill that I must say sometimes must be really taught. Sometimes must be explicitly taught. Because one of the things that in my work as a psychologist and as an educator, it's very interesting because we sometimes work with children, and these are children that I work with, who have social communication difficulties, and they have some problems having natural or intuitive empathy. Okay? And one of the key skills deficit is that they don't distinguish between an opinion and a fact. So if, to them, this water is yucks, or that food is not nice, that's a fact. So if you think that that food is not so yucks, you are wrong, because my opinion is a fact. So they don't have this ability to distinguish between, yeah, that's what you think, that's your view, that's your opinion, and that's not a fact. So, and I think in my work with those kind of children, we actually go through a series of explicit teaching that makes the child understand, I get it. That's the difference between a fact and an opinion. So I think blue is the most beautiful color in the world, right? I know that that's not a fact, it's my opinion. So if you come and tell me, no, red is the most beautiful color in the world, I don't end up hating you, having an argument with you, and want to kill you, because, yeah, so that's your opinion. If I recognize that, fine, I can live with it. I'm still happy with my blue, and you're red. But then I don't go into loggerheads, right? That's children. Sometimes I feel not only children need that. Yes, I think that's something that perhaps we should open up to a wider circle. But that is often something that we take for granted in our work. And I don't think, and I think this too, if you think about it, opportunities to recognize similarities and opportunities to learn, to deal with differences, definitely a school have a part, but you know the motherhood statement? It takes a village to raise a child, right? Because these opportunities often come when you least expect. When you're working and, you know, suddenly there's a smoke outside, and because joysticks are burning, that's your opportunity. So as a parent, as an individual, do you see that as a nuisance, or do you see that as an opportunity for you to actually teach your child, your neighbor, your nephew, whoever, that maybe we can recognize similarities in this, and maybe we can learn to deal with the difference that we experience in this. Thank you.
Professor, more questions? Prof. Noaisha? Yes.
Thank you for sharing all your reflections and your views. I just want to ask Mr. Hon a question. That you talked about the changing profile of the students, right? The school teaching children of migrants, to one that has changed considerably over the decades. But I just want to ask you further about another dimension, which is that recently there's been a lot of debates and discussion about the dominance of students from a more elitist group, a more elitist class, making their way into elitist schools. And I'm sure Mariam probably is not an exception as far as this development is concerned. I just wonder to what extent has such a development impacted on the school's philosophy for its teaching and learning. That's then to Sharifah also maybe my question. I'm curious about why that to me, right, as an observer, there have been changes to religious orientation. I'm speaking from experience of the Muslims, but I think also probably the same evidence can be found in other religious communities. You spoke of the contributions of your great-grandfather to other faith-based communities, and even to other social causes like donating a piece of it for the use of a hospital, and of course the church. And over time, we don't see this happening anymore. Like mostly wakaf or endowments that are created by Muslims are often confined to the use of the Muslim communities. Sometimes even donations are made to Muslims abroad, say Indonesia or other parts of the world, to build mosques. And there's very little consciousness or awareness or even that commitment to giving money for a cause beyond the community. And I don't think this is a unique experience again, confined only to Muslims. I can also observe that the same thing is happening to other religious-based communities. And I wonder how do you think this kind of orientation can be alleviated, right, in the interest of developing more graciousness and commitment towards a wider community that we all share similar problems and investing in.
Thanks, Prof. Noor Aisha. Dr. Hon and I are actually talking about this topic of elitism and elites over lunch, so I think he should be prepared to answer this question. We'll take one more question from this side of the room.
Hi, Serena Pang here, local advocate for the arts and tech community. So through a process of education and re-education, we aim to be cohesive, united and harmonious. The question is cohesion and unity amongst different people inherent or performative? Multi-ethnic Singapore is a fact, but is multi-ethnic Singapore cohesive, cohesionness? Is it a performative? Do we perform cohesion? Do we perform unity? If we do, if it's a performance or performative, how do we rise above that? Not to put our panelists in a spot, but as policy influencers and researchers, would you rather deal with a Singapore that broadly performs cohesion and unity, but could be inwardly brooding and dissatisfied? Or would you rather have acts of uncohesiveness or feelings of discontentment right from the start, so we know about the issues honestly from the get-go? Thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Noor, shall we start? Maybe one last question before we turn it to the panelists.
Hi, my question is for Irshad. Yes, a good book. On religious divide, since you were saying that, and I think it gives the impression that then it gives the impression that the root causes of conflict today are religiously grounded. I was just wondering whether you're thinking of expanding your work, which divide between three groups, intra-religious, class issues, in this one we're talking about, as well as cross-ideology, across different religions, in the fundamentalists and so on. Just wondering if you want to piece this group should consider as well.
Thank you. Perhaps you can tackle the questions in order. Maybe Dr. Hon first on the question of elite and elitism. Yeah.
This is the first time this question of elitism is posted to me, because usually question on elitism always go to RI. Would you like to answer? Okay, please. Hwa Chong, perhaps Hwa Chong is basically, we are still fundamentally a Chinese school. In fact, students from Hwa Chong are pretty humble. In fact, lots of feedback from the potential employers, including a lot of interviewers from PSD and so on. They have been telling me, hey, your students have been too humble, right? And they always play down their own abilities, and they always speak very low about themselves, though they are able to do a lot more things. So they are advising me to teach my students to be more confident and to project their abilities, during interviews and so on. So I guess because of this humble nature of the students that nobody asked me a question about elitism. Yeah, so it's not a problem for us. Yeah. So I hope I've answered you. The second question is a bit philosophical. I think Sharifah can handle it better. Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
All right, I'm actually going to address Aisha's question about why we don't see the same extent or same type of generosity that we had maybe 5 generations ago. Okay, first I must set the record straight, okay? Yes, my great-great-great-grandfather gave away land. After 200 years, Aljunied no more land. I don't have swathes of land to go away. So please, if you're having ideas, I'm sorry to tell you that I don't have any more land to give away, right? After 200 years, it's either sold off, given away, or taken away by Land Acquisition Act. That's another conversation. Right? So I just want to set the record straight. And I think in Singapore today, land is so scarce. I think it's rare, if not people actually donating land, but they still do. But I don't think that is the mode in which people contribute anymore. Not the majority of us, anyways. Yes. Julian is saying no. Yes, right? Okay. So, but I think the idea of contributing to your community and beyond your community, in my experience, and I've been involved in community services at various levels, at the community level, at beyond the community, at disability groups. I'm also involved in NCSS and Muhammadiyah. I think it's thriving pretty well, right? But perhaps the difference is that one, when it comes to donate, the more common will be people giving money, right? And I think that's where, in Singapore, perhaps, I think it's not so simple as people not wanting to give to another faith. That might be true for some people, but what I understand is in terms of contributing financially to VWOs or social service agencies, most donors want to give to an agency that, 2 criteria. One, that agency really needs it financially, right? Not too healthy a reserve, right? That means you really want to give people that want it. Secondly, they want to see that you are doing something that they can connect with, whether it's education, whether it's something concrete. And I volunteer for the Muhammadiyah home, and we've had people of all religions and races contributing that way. And I know of people, through my work with NCSS, of Muslims contributing similarly, financially, to other non-Muslim organizations, underpinned by the same fact. They look for organizations whereby they know may need that money more. And we know, again, because perhaps the Muslim community is smaller, and some of the donors to Muhammadiyah Home tell me that. I'm actually giving this because I know some of the organizations that I used to give to, which are the majority of the majority groups, I know that they're better off. So they actually seek out for that reason. So I think there's that dimension as well that we need to take into account. Although I agree with you, there might be still some hesitation. So I don't think it's so simple. The most common and most valuable thing that people give away is actually time. That's the most valuable thing that we have, because once you give it, you never give it back. And money cannot buy you time, right? And I think that's where I think we can do a lot more in terms of encouraging people to see the time that we give to others, where the cause is useful, where the cause is beneficial, where the cause resonates with values that is universal, should be recognized. And I think sometimes the problem is people who transcend those racial boundaries, they prefer to be quiet. I know quite a number of them, right? I too contribute to non-Muslim organizations, but usually the motivation is not to be seen. Right? So I don't know whether we don't showcase these people enough. These people are very shy, they are pathologically publicity averse, that they shy away from that. So perhaps we need to think about how do we recognize them, and how do we perhaps do it in a way that is dignified, because it can become a caricature whereby you get that one Malay who donate to one non-Malay organization, and you play it up like a rah-rah, which sometimes that individual may not like as well. So I think it's a complex issue. It needs to be handled delicately, but I think it's much more complex than simply people not being comfortable to to give beyond their boundaries, because in my personal experience on the ground, that is happening more than most people are aware of.
Sure. Thanks for the question. I think you raised a good point, because we have been discussing internally as a committee and also as Rose of Peace, how do you want to move forward? Because what we focused on a lot was all the happy things, things that get people together. But there are a lot of thorny issues. I mean, roses doesn't come with just a rose, right? It comes with thorns. So we have to also address them at some point. And for intra-religious, at this point in time, we have the position that yes, we attend a lot of these. We work with many organizations. If you take the Muslim organizations, for instance, amongst the Muslims, the Sunni Shia divide, the sectarianism. So we work with a lot of my VPs are Shia as well. So we've got a lot of people from various from the Baha'i, from just the Muslims itself. So we engage them, but we haven't done anything specifically with them. For instance, also for the Christians, the denominational, non-denominational, we have engaged all of them. So we were on friendly terms with everyone, but we haven't got an opportunity to bring them all together. But I think moving forward, perhaps not this year, next year, but in future, we are looking at how we can bring them together to work together and things like that. Even for the Buddhists, we work with Soka, we work with other Buddhist organizations, but themselves, they don't see eye to eye sometimes, but we are youth, so, and as long as they are committed towards building peace in Singapore, we engage them. So that's for intra-religious, perspective. Class issues, really we haven't focused on that per se, to be honest, but what we do is provide them the platform through various engagement activities. So we have IT students beside a student from NUS, for instance, from madrasa, from SAB schools, etc. So as much as possible, when they're grouped into various locations for the distribution of roses, etc., we group them as diverse as possible, so that they have an opportunity to meet someone of different background, different class, different racial and religious background. So that way we hope that we build that friendship, or at least break some barriers. So we try to engineer that as much as possible. But in terms of discussion of such issues, we haven't gone into that yet. And the ideologies, I think it's I can promote our upcoming conference. So we are focused on all the good things for now, the happy topics, faith in action, etc., this and that, diversity, unity, harmony. Our upcoming conference is going to be violence in the name of religion, where we're going to look at all the four major religions and what are the pain points in every religion, and we're going to get experts to speak about that. So we're also looking at how we can address these thorny issues in a way that is more engaging and intellectual as well, before we go down to the ground and get the youth to be discussing about such issues. Yeah.
Thanks, Irshad. I think Serena had a question on how can we rise above performance. Any of you would like to tackle that question? If I could rephrase it, Serena, do you mean can we move beyond tolerance to more harmony and engagement and friendships across the races?
You just reframed the topic to my topic. Okay, it's okay. No, I think it's fine. I think, again, I just share with you what has often come up in the experiential conversation. And one issue that sometimes we have an interesting debate is this value of having friends of different races. And it's quite interesting, because while generally I would say, I know the way to have opportunities, to share differences, is to have friends of different races. But then again, there's other people who hold different views, different opinions. Not fact, but opinions. And they say, no, why should I don't have any friends of a different race, but I'm fine. Why do I need to have a friend of a different race? I can still be respectful. I know I can read up, I can Google, as they do now, anything about Malay weddings, death, and funerals, not a problem. So genuinely, and this is not creating, they genuinely don't get it. Why is it that you need to have friends of a different race? I had someone who says, I'm a GP, my clinic is in a neighborhood. Mariam, I see more Malays I bet I see more Malays every day than you do. Because, my clinic is there, I see every day. So it takes a while before suddenly the penny drop. when you are a doctor and you see, 80 patients, let's assume all of them of a different race from you, there is something in that interaction. It's called unequal power. Unequal power is an antithesis to friendship. Unequal power does not reside in a friendship relationship. That thing is almost like that thing that went in his head when we came to that landing point, because that is the crux. That is why friendship is so important, because it's not about how many people that you interact with, it's whether your interaction is on reciprocal basis, because that's what friendship gives you. And if your interactions to other people is purely a client, a customer, or someone that either you serve or serves you, that's where the unequal power lies, then it's not quite there. Thank you.
I think let me just add on a bit. As doing my presentation, I shared 4 levels that roses look at. First one is awareness. In our public engagement, we talk about, when we outreach to people who on the streets, etc., we share with them about the interfaith message and about diversity, about cultural appreciation, etc. After awareness, what we feel is the next stage is them becoming a participant, attending the conferences, attending the forums. At the intellectual discourse, we talk about understanding the different, the nuances behind certain practices, the traditions, the religion, etc. After once they are done understanding, we hope many of them become our volunteers, our advocates. So that is the level of appreciation. The fact that they're able to appreciate the differences and they're able to advocate for it and advocate across religious and racial divides. So, and then the top layer of the pyramid, we have ambassadors. So the ambassador program, they're really multipliers. So I think coming back to your question, when you talk, are we able to rise above? What we realized is that when we launched the ambassador program, we thought we were probably going to get 5 people signing up or 10 people signing up, but we had 90 applicants. And this is a 1-year commitment. And these people are working adults, and these people are young working adult students in universities, going to universities, just graduated, etc. So it's a very diverse background. One of the first person to ask the question, Mohamed, he's also one of the Roses of Peace ambassador. So, and you'll be surprised when you give them the platform, the youth, they are willing to step forward and perform and to be engaged and also multiply in the sense that one of our ambassador, in fact, her friend was inspired by what she's doing at Roses of Peace and she started her own initiative. And we've got like several cases of such things whereby people start their own small grown-up initiative because they're inspired by what they see their peers are doing. So I think we can move beyond that. I think there are avenues for us to do that. And if you don't have the avenue, just create one. So what's stopping you, right? Yeah.
Okay, let me add to what Sharifah said. I think I totally agree with her that tolerance is really not enough. So the next best thing I could do was to help a student to learn to be respectful. Okay, so respectful mind is something that we have been strongly advocating. Having said that, I must say some of the other students who have initiated certain programs like the Project Integrate that I mentioned, I think they have reached the empathy level because they actually spent 1 whole year working with migrant workers. They spent time working with them, looking after them, and having fun together with them. So this group of students probably have reached a level of empathy. But I won't say all students in Hwa Chong. But I can see more and more things are being done. For example, when our student went to Surabaya doing community service with ITE students, they spent 2 weeks together. That kind of interaction, yes, I think they can forge very strong friendship. Again, it can lead to empathy. And before I retired, I started another program. I invited students from other schools, cluster schools, to join our boarding school program, where students from other schools are coming in to actually live together with a student for half a year, right, within the boarding school. So to me, that kind of program will have a potential to forge very, very close friendship. I hope more can be done, right? But it's not my business anymore. I'm retired.
Can volunteer.
On that note, the timekeeper is ringing the bell constantly. So just to wrap up, it's been a very inspiring session. I think my key takeaway is that we can all make a difference. Okay, we can all be champions for interracial harmony, interracial understanding, and I think like Irshad just alluded to it earlier. If you want to do something, you can do it. You can be the one pushing people towards from mere tolerance towards understanding and engagement, and you can be the one crossing that bridge and making a friend of another race, of another religion. So on that note, I would like to thank our panelists, our 3 panelists. Thank you all for being in the firing line and accepting our invitation, and I hope you enjoy the rest of today's session. Thank you.
I think just, last thing. I think Dr. Hon said he's retired now, he can't do anything. I think you can still do a lot of things, you can volunteer with us, and so can everyone else.